Nearly 50 million people in the U.S. get sick from foodborne illnesses every year. A system to track contaminated products and stop outbreaks was pioneered by Steve Musser. He's Deputy Center Director for Scientific Operations at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at the FDA. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mimi.
So before we talk about the system you created, I want to ask how it previously worked with an outbreak to identify it and remove it from the food chain.
Okay, real good question. So the system that we replaced this with is pretty simple. It was a very easy system designed to just look at human illness. So one of the problems we had at FDA, because we regulate the food side, is we would know that people are sick, but we didn't know where they got sick from or how they got sick. And so what we needed was a new system, a much more high-resolution system that could help us identify really quickly where a food was coming from or a particular food that was even involved. And so previously we would know, it would take months, and most of the outbreaks were never identified. We just never knew what was going on. So we created this new high-resolution technique.
All right, so it's the use of whole genome sequencing. What does that mean?
Probably the best way to describe it is DNA sequencing, like 23andMe. And you've heard about how people that have been falsely imprisoned have been let out of jail because of DNA evidence. Well, we're doing the same kind of fingerprinting with bacteria.
And so how quickly can you pinpoint where it came from so you can shut it down before more people get sick?
Almost instantly if we've done a previous inspection. So imagine we've done an inspection of a facility and we've found an organism outside or not on food contact, and we have sequenced that organism. If it happens to get in the food again, we know instantly. We actually know within 24 hours that there's an illness. And so when we might have had tens or hundreds of people sick, now we get 2 or 3, maybe.
And this is saving lives because people can die from E. coli and other pathogens. So how did you get the idea for this system?
Oh, we tried lots of things that didn't work first.
The American way, which is great.
Yeah, so we were tasked late 2000s, 2008, 2009 by then Commissioner von Eschenbach with finding a solution that would help us quickly identify the source of illness. And we tried a lot of things, we really did. And then we tried whole genome sequencing. At the time, it was very expensive, about $1,000 a run. Now it's about $50, $60. And when we did the first experiments, everyone in the room went, oh, this is going to work. This is what we've been looking for.
So you also oversaw the establishment of the Genome Tracker database. What information does that collect?
So this is really the most important part, and it's the heart of the network, is how to store all this data. So before, the data that was collected was very small in comparison, but now we're collecting huge amounts of data. It's difficult for me to describe how big, but many, many times what was collected before. And now we're approaching 1 million sequences in the database, which is quite a lot of data. So we went to the experts, which is the National Center for Biotechnology at NIH. They're the people that do all the genome sequencing. They hold all the data. So it's kind of a genetic library, and they're experts at this. And we partnered with them. They store all the data, so all the data is uploaded into their system every day, probably 12 to 15,000 sequences a week.
And do you collect data internationally as well? Because what if an outbreak starts overseas somewhere?
Yeah, really good point. So we import much of our food that we eat. 80% of the seafood, fruits and vegetables in the wintertime, almost all imported. So we do have a very significant partnership overseas, and that was the real important part of this network. Previously, the network that was established was just for public health labs. You had to be a member, which was great if you were just doing human cases, but if you wanted to tie them to environmental cases, you need a lot of people doing environmental isolates in food. And so the really interesting part of this, and the great part about this, is we created this open database where everybody could deposit sequences. Whether we were paying you to do the sequencing like a state, or you were just a volunteer like another organization like Public Health England, or France, or Germany, or Italy.
So Steve, can this system be used to track other diseases and other public health issues?
In fact, it can. And we had a really good project about halfway through COVID where we were asked by our biologics group if we could predict the kinds of COVID variants that might be coming up. So we used the network, the US network that we had established at the states, to start looking at wastewater. And we were doing this in collaboration with CDC, except we were having to look at something very different, which was the rise and fall of different variants. Took us a little while, but we figured out how to use wastewater to predict and really observe in real time variants coming up in the population and leaving the population.
So Steve, what's the next big tech advancement coming in food safety? What would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see the expansion of this network. Right now, we're only about halfway. We have about half the number of states involved. I'd really like to see all of them involved. We need a lot more environmental testing, so the next big advancement would be expanding our various networks and agreements with states and local governments to acquire more data, because it's really an intersection of, we have the human illness data and the environmental food data, where they intersect, that's where we get the power of this technology.
And you were a finalist for a Service to America medal. How did you feel?
Great honor. To be quite honest, I didn't know much about it when I was first nominated, and when I looked into it, it was really amazing. I was at the Sammys Awards finals last week. It was inspirational. I mean, seeing the people that won and the people that were nominated was just incredible.
Yes, a lot of great public service out there.
Yes.
Steve, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.